Andrew Jackson is one of the most divisive historical figures we have. So we are in historical court today. You are all detectives. You have your detective materials in front of you. You have a Q&A sheet where you're going to be allowed to go out and interview people. Now, I know sometimes people don't like to go and role play, and that's okay. You can also go down to lab 250 and pull up the original documents and read the documents instead of interviewing the actors. It's up to you, or you can do both. But I'm going to give you carte blanche. You can do either or. But it's an opportunity to interact with the documents. I kind of like doing the role playing first because it gets the students more kind of comfortable, and it's what it's taking place. It's an interaction between individuals. Because when these documents were written, Andrew Jackson believed that he was doing the right thing. He honestly believed that the Native Americans would be better if they were all moved to Oklahoma, especially in the southeast region where they wanted to use that land for plantations. So the settlers were getting upset because they wanted access to that land. And so Andrew Jackson, in his mind, he thought he was doing the humane, just thing by replacing the Native Americans. And eventually what's going to happen is the Cherokee Nation is going to refuse to move, and there's going to be some discussion about that. And you'll read the primary documents that answer these questions. Another thing that I try not to do is give too much background where I'm just lecturing. I want the students to go and find the information. It has more relevance when they find the answer themselves, and that relates to creativity. They've actually found that education lacks creativity. And it's to the point that sometimes people don't even recognize what creativity is. Creativity isn't designing something and making something brand new. Creativity is going through a creative process. So having the students look at something that even though other people have looked at, historians have looked at, students have looked at, it's the first time that they're looking at it and they're analyzing it, that's a creative experience that needs to be treated as such. So you want to encourage them to interact with the documents, and usually when students try to take a shortcut, we all know this, they'll say, hey, what do you think about this, or how would you answer this? It's like, whoa, I want to know what you think. So you put it back on them. The inquiry process is on them. They need to be the ones asking the questions. And so this is an activity that I believe can be modified throughout all the grades. And if you go down here, these are the new standards that we have for 21st century teaching. And you can also see that it's tied to the inquiry approach. So we are in a situation where now we have things, I don't know how it happened, but the stars are aligned. We have the C3 framework, which is basically the national model of how to approach social studies. And then so there's a strong emphasis on inquiry learning. I've been a proponent of inquiry learning for over a decade, so I'm glad to kind of see it get its place on the stage. And then you move over, they're developing techniques to complement inquiry learning. Now, the state of Georgia. We actually have a number of people in the state of Georgia that are really having a strong impact on the national level. Dr. Lee wants to work with teachers. If you're a classroom teacher, I encourage you to contact Dr. Lee, especially if you have ideas about how to build resources, because he can share all the resources that he has with you. And then if you have ideas and say, hey, I've developed this inquiry model, you can send it to him and he can share it with other teachers. So there's always this collaborative view. And I'm sure everyone has heard this in education. Beg, borrow, steal. It's okay. Like we all share. It's fairly common in this profession. So if somebody's providing you resources, yes, have that, especially if they're free. So the 21st century standard model is really large, but there are four main components. The first one is learning useful skills. So the skill is, my favorite obviously, is inquiry. So having the questions, having that ability to develop questions. And we have questions in front of you that you're going to ask the actors or you're going to think about as you're looking at the primary sources. But eventually, you want to get to the place where your students are the ones who are developing the questions. Why is it important for your students to be the ones who are actually developing the questions?
And have more meaning to them.
Absolutely, yes. You want them to have ownership. But before we get to that place of ownership, we have to model. We have to show them what good questions are. They need to see it from us, and then they need to generally just try to adopt their own format for those questions. So really, step one is the inquiry process. Step two is drawing conclusions. So you're going to look at this information. you're going to arrive at a different location. Some people are going to think Andrew Jackson acted humanely and he did what was necessary. Other people disagree. John Quincy Adams was a fierce detractor of Andrew Jackson's policy. He really disliked Andrew Jackson. And, if you look at all his personal letters, I mean, it was very evident that he did not like Andrew Jackson. And so we're looking at this time period and we're looking at these two people kind of debating. And we have our views. Like, we look at things in a certain way now. Are there issues and events that we look back on even 10 years ago and we have a different opinion about? Possibly. I mean, the war in Iraq. I mean, we had information, definitive information, that weapons of mass destruction were there. Turned out they weren't there, and it turned out other things happened and transpired, and so people started shifting. When we initially started the engagement, over 90% of the U.S. population supported it. 10 years later, less than 50% supported. So what happened? More information came about, people changed their decisions. So how are you going to draw conclusions? And this is really empowering for students. Whenever I do these types of activities, when I'm invited out to schools, it's really interesting when you see the students having these debates. And it's really working when you go to the lunchroom and they're still discussing their positions. That's what you want. You want them to walk away with this experience. 3, the opportunity to share their knowledge, to give them an opportunity to say, I reached this conclusion, now I'm going to share it with the general population. Because basically, on the Georgia Milestone Assessment, they're writing their opinions on a particular issue, or they're providing evidence on a position. And then the next aspect, which will be the probably next spring, is the application. Like, how do you take this information and apply it to your own life? So next spring's workshop is going to be based on you with your students and saying, this is what you can do with this information. Dr. Lee talked about that as well. Something as simple as just writing a letter, potentially to a congressman or some sort of representative, all the way to having a boycott. I mean, all these different ways of having students get involved, and we'll discuss all of those ways. I lean towards the ways that won't get people arrested, but if you feel it's necessary, I will support you and try to help you build that model so that you can achieve your objectives, ideally for your students. So as we go down, we have some models. So here are the questions. So you should have a copy of this in front of you. So you can pull up these links by just typing them in. And then the Library of Congress, they also have their own detective types of activities, and there are 2 links to those as well. We won't have to go over those in detail, but they have their own system. So you can use my system, you can use their system, and there are other systems. There are plenty of different systems you can use to go through this process. There's also a thinking chart. That's the next link. That's also very helpful for me to have students kind of go through and analyze information as it's being discussed. Okay. So, our next step is we have a couple different options. One, you can take your materials and go around this floor. Yes, go around this floor and interview the actual figures. Now, these are individuals who have read through these primary sources, and you can ask them these questions, and they should be able to provide an appropriate response. If you need additional information, elementary, you can go to Lab 250, which is downstairs, and you can use that lab to pull up these links and read those sources yourself. The middle and high school, they can go to Lab 223, which is across the hall on the 2nd floor, and you can use that also as a resource. I'm going to give you about 30 minutes to go interview these people, but then we'll meet in lab. We'll meet in the computer lab around 11:30. Even if you're not in there, we'll go and we'll round people up. And you're going to develop an Easily. Anybody in here use an Easily before? Anybody? Oh, awesome. I know most of the people I work with hate when I say this, but a new experience. I love new experiences. So an Easily is a chart that you can use to document your information. And this is really helpful for students. I'll just show you this really quick and you can open it and read it. Okay, so this is the Easily system. It's great for social studies teachers, but it's basically you're creating a computer-generated kind of mind map for your students, and they have different systems, so you don't have to create your own. You can just go over here and choose a category, and it has history as a category, and get all these different charts. So you're going to take the information and you're going to use it to build like a visual representation of whether or not you think Andrew Jackson was, guilty or innocent. And you can use this to demonstrate to your peers. So really what we're looking at right now is an opportunity. You don't have to use this. People use different types of systems. It's completely up to you. But you want to create some sort of visual representation. But once you kind of build this, you can have your students kind of look at the visual representation, and they can use that as basically an outline of how to construct their responses to any type of questions you want them to look at. Just to reiterate, we are going to go interview actors, so you can go around in probably groups of like 5 or 6. Once you've had a chance to interview the actors who are around this floor, you can go down to lab 250 if you're elementary, or you can go to lab 223 if you're middle or high school. And I'll walk around trying to help as best I can. So good luck trying to solve this case. So was Andrew Jackson a good person or a bad person?